7 senior Israeli Defense Forces officers are dead. These were not frontline soldiers. They were not young enlisted personnel absorbing the physical risks of a ground invasion. These were the architects of the battlefield, senior commanders, the people who sit deep underground in fortified command centers making the decisions that dictate where troops go, what gets targeted, and how this entire war is directed from the absolute highest levels of Israeli military planning. 7 of them were wiped out in a single strike by one missile that absolutely nobody could stop. A Fattah-2 hypersonic missile bypassed the most sophisticated, heavily funded air defense architecture on the planet, reached a heavily fortified IDF regional command center, and obliterated it. Israeli military officials are now using a word they have strictly avoided throughout this entire conflict. They are calling this devastating, not a setback, not a temporary tactical disadvantage. Devastating. This is the word military communications reserve for catastrophic events that fundamentally alter the operational reality of a war. 7 senior officers, 1 missile, 1 fortified bunker, and 10 interceptors that meant absolutely nothing. Stay with me, because the next few minutes are going to completely reframe everything. You thought you knew about the trajectory of this war. I'm going to break down exactly what this weapon is, how it shattered a fortified command center that 10 simultaneous interceptor missiles could not protect, and what Israel's own defense industry has just publicly admitted about why this changes global warfare forever. The vice president of Rafael Advanced Defense Systems, Israel's premier weapons developer and the creator of the Iron Dome and Arrow systems, was forced to make a public statement so chilling it stopped military analysts around the world dead in their tracks. He compared trying to defend against the Fattah-2 hypersonic missile to trying to guard LeBron James with a single player. He admitted out loud that this missile opens a brand new era in air defense, an era where the underground bunkers that were supposed to guarantee the survival of military leadership are no longer safe. The era of the invincible command center died today, and the shockwaves of this single strike are right now rewriting military doctrines not just in the Middle East, but in Washington, Beijing, and Moscow. To understand why this is a turning point in the war, we have to look at the terrifying physics of what the Fattah-2 actually is. This is not just an upgraded version of the rockets Iran has been firing for the past few weeks. It is an entirely different category of weapon, representing a technological leap that defensive systems simply were not built to handle. The first generation Fattah-1 revealed in 2023 was already a nightmare for defense systems. It flew at Mach 15, maneuvered in its terminal phase, and proved it could bypass Patriot and Arrow systems. But the Fattah-2 is the second generation, and the difference is not incremental. The Fattah-2 was specifically designed to defeat the exact defensive responses that the first few weeks of this current conflict revealed. When an object travels through the Earth's atmosphere at Mach 15, the intense friction generates a plasma sheath. This is essentially a bubble of superheated ionized gas that envelops the missile. Now, here's the critical problem for defense systems. The plasma bubble acts as a blackout curtain for radio frequency signals. Any hypersonic weapon relying on GPS radar seekers or ground command uplinks goes completely blind inside that plasma sheath. But Iranian engineers solved this problem. They integrated a plasma cloud management system using a combination of inertial navigation and advanced optical terminal guidance. The Fattah-2 does not need radio signals to find its target. It knows exactly where it is using internal measurements. And as it screams toward the ground, its optical sensors physically look for the target. Because it does not rely on radio frequencies, all the electronic warfare, all the jamming, and all the radio disruption techniques used by the defense are rendered completely useless. The result is a Mach 15 weapon that actively maneuvers through the atmosphere, maintains perfect precision, and strikes with an accuracy that Israeli defense officials could only describe as unprecedented. It did not just hit the military compound. It did not just hit the building next door. It hit the exact hardened structure housing the specific command function where those 7 senior officers were sitting. Now we must address the most alarming part of this event. 10 interceptor missiles were fired at this single Fattah-2, and all 10 failed. Understanding why they failed is the only way to realize that this was not a glitch or a human error. It was a brutal, unsolvable math problem. For an interceptor to destroy an incoming threat, it has to do 3 things: detect the threat, calculate an intercept path, and reach that exact point in space before the threat hits its target. A missile traveling at Mach 15 covers about 3 miles every single second. By the time a radar system gets a solid lock on the Fattah-2 at a distance of 200 kilometers, the defense system has less than 70 seconds before impact. The absolute fastest response time for an Arrow interceptor system from radar lock to launch to reaching intercept altitude is between 55 and 65 seconds. That leaves a margin of error measured in single digits. If there is any atmospheric interference, or if the target maneuvers and forces a recalculation, that margin instantly drops to zero, and the Fattah-2 is designed to maneuver. It does not fly in a predictable parabolic arc like a traditional ballistic missile. It makes violent high-speed course corrections in its terminal phase. Every time the missile shifts, the defense system has to recalculate the intercept point. But calculating takes time, and by the time the computer spits out the new coordinates, the Fattah-2 is already miles away from where it was supposed to be. Furthermore, the Fattah-2 uses its optical seeker to actively hunt the target, meaning its final descent is a dynamic, unpredictable attack. 10 interceptors were launched 10 times. The Israeli defense computers calculated exactly where the Fattah-2 would be. 10 times the interceptors flew to those coordinates, and 10 times they hit empty air because the hypersonic missile had already changed course. The LeBron James analogy used by the Rafael executive is perfectly accurate. You know, the player is driving to the basket, you send a defender to the exact spot to block him. But by the time your defender gets there, the player has spun around them and your defender is grabbing at shadows. 10 interceptors grabbed at shadows today, while the Fattah-2 drove straight through the concrete roof of the command center. The loss of these 7 senior officers is a catastrophic blow to the Israeli military's ability to direct this ongoing war. Since the Second World War, military survivability has been based on one core concept, dispersing command authority into multiple, highly fortified nodes. If you lose one, the network routes around the damage. The facility that was struck today was a regional operational command center. These 7 officers were not paper pushers. They were the specific individuals actively managing operations on multiple fronts. They were coordinating specific strike packages against Iranian targets, managing logistics for the ground invasion in Lebanon, and communicating directly with American forces stationed in the Gulf. When you eliminate 7 senior commanders in a single blast, their responsibilities do not just magically transfer to someone else without massive friction. The chain of command has depth, but the officers stepping up to replace the dead are now inheriting highly complex operations they were not previously managing. The institutional knowledge, the personal relationships with American liaison, the intimate familiarity with specific intelligence streams, all of that was vaporized in an instant. This creates a severe operational bottleneck at a time when the Israeli military is operating at maximum tempo across Gaza, Lebanon, and the broader Middle East. But the psychological damage inflicted by this strike is arguably worse than the physical damage. For 30 years, the doctrine of the fortified command center has been unquestioned. The IDF poured billions of dollars into deep underground bunkers, reinforced concrete redundant communication lines, and elite point defense systems. This architecture works perfectly against traditional ballistic missiles. But the Fattah-2 just proved that miles of concrete and the best interceptors money can buy cannot stop a Mach 15 weapon with optical terminal guidance and massive kinetic energy. Even if an interceptor manages to clip a hypersonic missile at the last second, a weapon moving at Mach 15 possesses so much sheer kinetic energy that the shattered debris of the missile will still impact the target with the force of a meteorite completely, destroying the bunker anyway. Every single officer sitting in an Israeli command center today is experiencing a horrific realization. They are doing the math. They are looking at the concrete walls around them and realizing that if Iran decides their bunker is the next target, there is absolutely nothing that can save them. This cognitive load, this underlying paranoia changes how a military operates. Commanders will start limiting their time in fixed locations. They will transition to mobile command units, which are inherently more chaotic, harder to coordinate, and highly vulnerable to. Communication breakdowns Iran did not just kill 7 officers today. They injected a paralyzing friction into the entire decision-making process of the Israeli military. What makes this event truly global, however, is who is watching and taking notes. The United States, China, and Russia are analyzing this strike with intense scrutiny because the Fattah-2 just provided real-world empirical proof of theories that have been debated for years. Right. In the middle of this conflict, a peer-reviewed defense journal in China published a highly detailed research paper analyzing the exact vulnerabilities of Western missile defense systems against hypersonic glide vehicles. The Chinese military researchers specifically concluded that speed terminal maneuverability and kinetic energy would render American and Allied interceptors largely ineffective. They predicted that even a successful proximity detonation by an interceptor would not stop a hypersonic weapon from destroying its target through sheer velocity. Western defense briefings have traditionally ignored this kinetic energy problem, assuming that an intercept is a kill. The Chinese paper said otherwise, and today Iran proved China right. 10 interceptors failed. The missile hit, and the bunker was destroyed. China is not just watching this for entertainment. Beijing has been aggressively developing its own hypersonic arsenal to counter American carrier strike groups and missile defense systems in the Pacific. The People's Liberation Army is using the skies over the Middle East as a live fire testing laboratory. The data generated by the Fattah-2 strike today will directly accelerate Chinese hypersonic programs. Within hours of this command center being destroyed, the United States Indo-Pacific Command had to urgently update its threat assessments. The fortified American command bunkers in Guam, Japan, and South Korea were built under the exact same defensive doctrine as the Israeli bunker that was just obliterated. If Arrow and Patriot systems cannot stop a Fattah-2 in the Middle East, they cannot stop a Chinese hypersonic glide vehicle in the South China Sea. Russia's reaction has been equally calculated. The Russian Ministry of Defense immediately issued a detailed analysis of the strike, noting how the Fattah-2's optical terminal guidance successfully bypassed the plasma sheath blackout. Russia has its own hypersonic glide vehicle, the Avangard, which uses a different architectural approach to solve the exact same physics problem. Moscow is actively comparing notes, validating that hypersonic maneuverability completely neutralizes NATO's Eastern European defensive shields. The Patriot batteries stationed in Poland, Germany, and Romania are built on the same intercept logic that failed 10 times today. Russia is quietly pointing at the smoking crater in Israel and sending a very clear message to NATO command. The missile shields you spent decades building are now obsolete. The era of impenetrable defense is over, but as the geopolitical shockwaves spread, a much darker, more immediate question is ripping through the Israeli intelligence community. How did Iran know they were there? A fortified regional command center is a highly classified asset. Its exact geographic coordinates are a closely guarded secret. The schedules of the senior officers who work there are strictly compartmentalized. This is not a building you can just find on Google Maps. Yet Iran knew the exact location of the hardened structure. They knew its specific operational function. Most terrifyingly, they knew exactly when a high concentration of senior officers would be inside the bunker, making the launch of a highly expensive strategically reserved weapon like the Fattah-2 mathematically worth the cost. This level of targeting precision suggests a catastrophic intelligence breach. This follows a chilling pattern we have seen unfold over the last few weeks. Strikes on highly secured ammunition depots, precise hits on classified parking locations for early warning aircraft, and now the decapitation of a regional command node. The Israeli military counterintelligence apparatus is currently in a state of absolute overdrive, desperately trying to figure out if Iran has access to real-time satellite feeds, deep human intelligence assets within the military structure, or compromised digital communication networks. The fact that Iran could map, track, and execute a flawless decapitation strike on a classified bunker means that no command facility is a secret anymore. Every time senior officers gather to plan their next move in Lebanon or Gaza, they have to wonder if their coordinates have already been fed into the targeting computer of a hypersonic missile. This disaster also lands squarely in the middle of a domestic political pressure cooker in Israel Prime. Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has spent the entirety of this conflict utilizing military successes as political capital, attempting to project an image of absolute security and control, despite his ongoing corruption trials and mounting international pressure. Every military victory was branded as a testament to his leadership, but you cannot use carefully calibrated PR language to spin the deaths of 7 senior commanders inside a bunker that was supposed to be the safest place in the country. The families of these officers are about to become the most potent political voices in Israel. They will demand to know why billions of dollars spent on missile defense resulted in 10 interceptors completely missing their target. They will demand to know why the military command infrastructure was fundamentally unprepared for a weapon that Iran has been publicly developing and boasting about for 3 solid years. The Israeli defense minister recently announced plans to widen the ground invasion into Lebanon, but pushing deeper into hostile territory requires flawless command and control. How do you widen a ground war when the very command centers directing the troops are being actively hunted and destroyed by weapons you cannot shoot down? The political argument for expanding the war is going to face intense domestic backlash, now that the illusion of absolute defensive superiority has been shattered. For the past several weeks, this war has been defined by a brutal but predictable rhythm. Israel and America strike Iranian logistics and leadership. While Iran uses drones and standard ballistic missiles to wear down air defenses, both sides have absorbed damage. Both sides have kept fighting. But the Fattah-2 strike is a massive escalation in capability, not just in firepower. Iran has just demonstrated that it possesses the ability to reach out and vaporize the highest levels of military leadership anywhere, at any time, regardless of what defense systems are standing in the way. They chose this specific target to send a message. They did not waste a hypersonic missile on an empty warehouse. They chose a target that was hardened, time-sensitive, and heavily defended. They proved that speed, precision, and kinetic energy can overpower decades of Western military doctrine. The 7 officers who woke up this morning to direct a war are gone. Their knowledge is gone. Their command networks are severed. The interceptors that were supposed to protect them fired blindly into the sky and failed. The vice president of the company that built those interceptors has told the world that a new era has begun. The era where a fortified bunker means safety is dead. Iran still has an unknown number of Fattah-2 missiles in its arsenal. They have the coordinates. They have the guidance systems.